It's hard to believe it's been about 25 years since the Lexus RX first went on the market. And back then it was one of the only luxury SUVs of its kind, which is even harder to believe considering what the segment looks like today. You know, that longevity isn't the only reason it's so popular, but it probably doesn't hurt either. But the big thing is it's known for being pretty predictable and reliable, and there's nothing like a hassle-free ownership experience for a vehicle to endear itself to the motoring masses. The other great thing about it, it's one of the only SUVs in this segment to be offered as a hybrid over the years, so it burns about as much gas as a Toyota Camry in the process. And you know, all that stuff is great, but I gotta say, just a couple years removed from a very important update, the RX is showing some serious signs of age. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. I want to get the bad stuff out of the way first, so let's talk about this infotainment system. And you know, I do have to give Lexus a little bit of credit because it was only a couple years ago that it updated the system and you got the choice of 2 touchscreens for the first time in the RX. But if you think that means you can ignore the controls down here on the console, you are sadly mistaken, and there are a bunch of other problems too. The first one being the location of this touchscreen. Because this cabin was designed before this was touch, it is crazy how far you have to stretch out. I'm a pretty tall guy. If I'm sitting in a normal seating position, I literally can't reach the screen from where I'm sitting. Now, again, like I always say, I try not to touch the screen when I'm driving because I'm focused on the road, but you know as well as I do, sometimes you need to switch between, I don't know, the music and your maps, something like that. So to not be able to just reach out and touch it, that is very annoying. There's some other stuff too. The first one being, well, if you want to pull up Apple CarPlay, there's no way to do it on the screen, and that's where these console controls come in. The only way you can pull up Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, both of which are standard in the RX, you got to hit this menu button down here first, and then that pulls up this little menu. It's very weird. There's no actual home screen. The map, that is your home screen. It'd be like if you turned on your computer and, I don't know, Microsoft Word was the default program that was open and you didn't have any choice. I find that so strange. It's very annoying, especially if I'm switching from satellite radio to my Google Maps. I have to hit this menu button down on the console. Very bizarre. And then here's my last complaint about the infotainment, and it really has more to do with the controls down here. They look and feel very dated, and it's also very confusing. It's not all that intuitive when you look at it in the context with the entire interface. I mean, this controller, the controls on the console, and the touchscreen. Let's say something like satellite radio. If you want to switch stations, the only way you can do it on the screen itself is with your presets. There's no way to tune or scan through the stations on the screen, so you have to reach down and use this tune knob, which is great that it's here, but it's just very awkward to have to go from here up to the screen, down to the controller on the console. It's a big jumbled mess, and I really can't wait to see that new system that's in the 2022 Lexus NX make its way into this RX. And then the other complaint I have about the inside, as you can see, headroom. Now, it doesn't look so bad right now, but that's because I'm kind of crouching down a little bit. You might not be able to notice, but here, let me sit up straight for you. Yeah, I'm sure you can see that. My head is jammed right into the edge of this sunroof. Now, this one I'm driving does have the panoramic sunroof that comes in a few of the different options packages, but keep in mind, a standard sunroof, that comes in every RX no matter what, so it's not all that comfortable up here, and the same goes with the back. Not a ton of headroom. I know I'm a tall guy. I always remind you guys I'm about 6'3". If you got kids in the back, that's not going to be a problem, but adults, they are going to struggle back there. But really, that's about it for my complaints about the cabin, and I do like the design a lot. I know Lexus has a reputation of being boring, but whether you're talking about in here or outside, that's clearly not the case. Whether you love it or you hate it, it definitely turns heads. It's not a very anonymous design. It has a unique look to it. And in here, if you take a look, the asymmetrical cabin, it's really cool. So you have mismatched air vents on either side of the dash, which I really like. And then I like the way this trim comes down and it kind of separates the center stack so that it cuts it off from the passenger, but it doesn't actually have a divider like that Hyundai Elantra that I reviewed earlier this year. I don't know if you guys remember that. It had this handle here on the console. We're going to go ahead and throw up a link so you can watch that one next, but I'm not so crazy about that. And actually, the Lexus LC has something similar. So it's cool that this has the look, but it doesn't actually have the divider there that cuts the passenger off from the center console. And another thing, this chair is so comfortable. Now, this one I'm driving does have one of the two F Sport packages you can get in the RX 450h, not the L. I'll get to that a little bit later on. So this chair, it's one of the F Sport seats, and it is a little bit heavier on the bolstering than the standard one, but it's not too much. It wraps around you just enough. It doesn't feel too tight. It just keeps you from sliding around in your chair. And like I said, it's so comfortable. Gobbles up hours of driving. I've had no complaints. And something else that's cool in the RX, every trim, you get heated and ventilated front seats and heated rear seats. And that's not something you often see in this segment. If you take a look at a brand like Mercedes, you have to pay for that stuff. And even Genesis, which gets a ton of credit for giving you all kinds of good stuff throughout its lineups. If you take a look at the GV80, you don't get genuine leather in the cheapest trim, and you don't get heated rear seats, but you get all of that in the RX. Doesn't matter what package you're talking about. And that is something I really like to see. And something else you get in every RX trim, a ton of advanced safety stuff. So lane keeping assist, there's some steering assist that works out on the highway, adaptive cruise control that works in stop and go traffic, blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert, there's forward collision warning, it's got automatic emergency braking, pedestrian detection, and cyclist detection. It is a very well-rounded package, and it all works really nicely too. Now, the cheapest one you can get, it's about 62 grand before tax. Not too bad in the context of the segment as a whole, and especially if you consider that this is a hybrid. There are some plug-in hybrids out there, but this is the only conventional hybrid, one that doesn't have a plug. So, you know, that pricing isn't too bad. If you look at it next to something like the Mercedes GLC class, it is cheaper. And same goes with once you add the options packages. On the safety front, if you want this head-up display I've got or the surround view monitor, well, you've got to spring for an options package like the one that's equipped on this tester I'm driving. It's the F Sport 3 package, and it's 14 grand. That is a lot of money, but you do get some really good stuff. Some of the other stuff you get for that money, this 12.3-inch touchscreen, all of these cool F Sport styling upgrades, adaptive suspension, a wireless phone charger, the big panoramic sunroof. It's a pretty good package, though it's still a lot of money, but at least you know where it's all going. If you don't want to spend that much, there is a $9,000 F Sport 2 package. It gets you most of the good stuff, but it skips some of the features here like the panoramic sunroof. And then for $14,000, there is another package that gets you all kinds of good stuff, but none of the styling upgrades. It's a lot more of a traditional luxury package, but really doesn't matter which one you're talking about. In the RX 450h, what you're really paying for is the hybrid powertrain, and it is a good one. Now, this is a Toyota product. That means it's all-wheel drive. It's got a separate electric motor in the back. It's disconnected from the rest of the powertrain, and it drives the rear wheels. And then under the hood, you've got a gas engine as well as twin electric motor generators, one that puts energy into the battery pack and one that drives the wheels, and it all works very well together. Now, before you get too worried, this is not a 4-cylinder. Just like the RX 350, which is the gas-only version, it's got a 3.5-liter V6 under the hood. The combined powertrain output, it's 308 horsepower, which is a little more than the V6 on its own. It's not a ton of output, but it's more than enough. There's tons of torque too. And I was actually surprised at just how peppy this thing is. Even in eco mode, which is what I have it in right now, if I get my foot into it, it gets up and goes pretty good, and it sounds pretty decent too. The only issue I have is the transmission. It's a continuously variable automatic. They're just not my favorite type of transmission. I've complained about them. Just about everyone in my line of work complains about them. And it really is that stretching. Now, Lexus engineers did try to make this thing feel a little bit more like a conventional automatic with some simulated shift points, but it just doesn't work, especially when you bury your foot into it. It really wants to wind out. It's not terrible, it's just not ideal, especially in a luxury vehicle, and then especially if you're talking about one that's the F-Sport. It's supposed to be at least a little bit of a performance thing. Yeah, the CVT isn't the right fit. But you know, the best part of this hybrid powertrain probably is its fuel efficiency. And to give you some context, this V6 on its own, it's good for 10.8 liters per 100 kilometers combined, which isn't bad for a mid-size premium SUV that has standard all-wheel drive. But if you take a look at this one, it's good for a combined 7.9 liters per 100 kilometers. That is really impressive. Like I said off the top, that's in Toyota Camry territory, and I've been right in that ballpark this week without too much effort. It's really good on gas, and it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. That to me is the key with a hybrid. I don't want to feel like I'm hypermiling and like I'm trying my hardest to maximize that fuel efficiency. I like it to just be normal driving. I don't feel like I'm slowing everyone down behind me. And then the added bonus of this thing, like I said, is it's got some giddy up. I'm out here again. I'm gonna spin the dial over to Sport Plus mode. If it weren't for that transmission, you'd have no idea this was a hybrid in the first place. Otherwise, this is a Lexus, so the experience is a lot more old school luxury. It's relaxed instead of sporty and sharp, even with the F-Sport package and the adaptive suspension, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's really smooth with this suspension. All of these rough roads, not a problem. Doesn't feel like it's gonna come undone over some of these really bad ones, and that I like a lot. And then the same goes with the steering setup. It's really nice. There's not a whole lot of feel, but my favorite part is you can actually tell that it's hooked up to a steering rack. It's not a total by-wire system. So some of these pressure cracks, you can actually feel them pulsing through the wheel, just enough to know that this is the real deal. Again, it just goes back to that hassle-free experience I talked about off the top. It's not especially exciting, but it's not destitute either. And once you get past how little headroom there is in here, the cabin's a decent size. It's not huge, but I think there's more than enough room in here. Width is the big one, so you don't feel like you're too close to the person sitting next to you, and you can actually fit 3 people across in the back if you need to. There's tons of leg room back there too, and I really like all the different ways you can configure the second row. That is very handy because there's not a ton of cargo room in here. You know, I do question the numbers just a little bit because I think Lexus says there's like 450 liters of space behind the backseat and 950 with the back seats folded. That's less than the RAV4 with the back seats upright. So there's something funny here. Now you can definitely tell it's not as cavernous as that RAV4 with the seats folded, but it definitely doesn't feel that small all the way through, but there are some handy tricks here. So let's say you want to have 4 full seats, but you got skis in here or something like that. You can actually fold the center section of the back seat down in a 40-20-40 split. So you still have 4 full-size seats, but you have some extra cargo room. But then if you want to fold the seats down entirely, well, A, they've got power switches both on the sides of the seats and in the back, and they fold in a 60-40 split, and then they actually slide on rails in a 60-40 split as well. So if you want to take away some of the leg room for the passengers in the back for a little bit more room for your stuff, you can do that. I really like all the clever touches that make it just a little more practical. And then again, the battery pack, it's under the second row, but you wouldn't really notice except for with the panoramic roof and the way it cuts into headroom. Now, don't forget, if you do need even more room, you can get the RXL. That's an extended version of this, so the wheelbase stays the same, but you get about 4 inches more overall length. That's really cool. You can even get a 3rd row in it. So if you need some extra space for when the in-laws are in town, it's cool that you can have that 3rd row because you don't get one in this RX 450h. But there are some key things to remember, and the first one being you can't get any of the F-Sport stuff with the longer version of these 2 SUVs. And another thing to keep in mind is that you're still stuck with this infotainment system. To recap, I like the styling, comfort, and standard safety equipment that comes with the Lexus RX 450h. I don't like the dated controls, the awkward way the infotainment system works, or the continuously variable transmission. I wouldn't quite say you can't go wrong with the Lexus RX 450h, but it is close. That infotainment system, yeah, pretty terrible, but with a little practice and a whole lot of patience, it just might be worth the sacrifice considering how worry-free the rest of the experience is.